I started teaching officially in 1970. I was in ninth grade. I started teaching dance. So back then there were not a lot of choices for women. I didn't like blood, so I didn't want to be a nurse. I could never have kept orders straight, so I could not possibly be a waitress. I cannot do hair, so that was out. And I wanted actually to be in the State Department. I wanted to work in the Foreign Service. But I also wanted to be a mom, and I wasn't sure that those two were compatible by the time I would have gone to law school. And so I started off teaching. And I actually started off in secondary ed. And the placement counselor came to me and said, "You can't coach because you're a woman. You cannot be a social studies teacher because they will only want social studies teachers that can coach." Never mind that I played every intramural sport. So he said, "Why don't you become an elementary teacher?" So for 2 years, I took courses that would go for either one, and I ended up in elementary. And I taught at O'Hara, which at that time had 6th grade in it. And the principal said to me, "Why don't you become a secondary teacher? You're really good in history. You'd be," and I just went, no, I'm going to stay in elementary. It kind of like infuriated me, like I was being told, because you can't coach, you must be an elementary teacher.
When you were a student, who was your favorite teacher and what made them special?
I had several favorite teachers. My 2nd grade teacher, Mrs. Morrow, was a great favorite of mine, even though she hit me with the ruler for talking one time. She just was a very kind, good person. She affected my teaching in that I was really shocked when I sat next to her one day in reading group and I saw that in her book, she had the questions that she was asking us. And I couldn't understand why teachers had to be told what to ask. And I will tell you that shaped my teaching because I did not use manuals when I taught. I think from 2nd grade on, I just thought teachers' manuals just didn't make any sense. That they had to be for people that couldn't think for themselves. I also had some social studies teachers that affected me because I love social studies and problems of democracy. So yeah, those were the people that affected me.
Did you have a favorite lesson, unit, or activity that you enjoyed to teach every year?
If you would run into former students of mine, they would sing the latitude and longitude song that I made up to teach the difference between latitude and longitude. So that cracks me up because it's like, how important is that really in the grand scheme of things? But one of my favorite lessons was I would go to the beach and I would find shells that looked alike. And then I would pass out the shells to my students and they would have to write a description of the shells. And then other kids would have to read the descriptions and figure out what shells went to what people. And then that was also an open house activity for the parents. That was kind of a fun activity. The kids enjoyed doing that. And I learned a lot about the kids' writing styles very quickly from that.
What is the funniest or most entertaining moment you remember from your years in teaching?
There was so much fun. There was so much fun. One was kind of embarrassing for me. My classroom became a Department of Education demonstration classroom. So teachers from other districts would come and watch me teach. And in social studies one day, half the kids didn't do their homework. I was so embarrassed and so angry. Later that afternoon, the reading and writing lessons were so incredibly good that the vocabulary word for the next day was redemption, because I felt the kids had redeemed themselves for not having had their homework done. Another moment was we had a director of elementary ed who was kind of tough and rough, and he'd been my principal, and he was very, he didn't laugh a lot, and he didn't show emotion a lot. And he came to my class as a guest reader and read a book that made me cry. And that was something, because it was like, really? Really, you made me cry. You made my kids cry. It was such an emotional book. So that was kind of a fun moment.
You spent decades working with young people. What did your students teach you?
Everyone has a story to tell, and everyone has a redeeming quality. You can always find something lovable about every student, and you can always find something to find a hook to get into their lives. I also learned an awful lot about the sadness of some people's home lives. After I spent 20 years in the classroom, I spent 15 years as instructional support teacher, which was like being a child advocate, and that was kind of heart-wrenching.
During your time as a teacher, what was the biggest change that you witnessed in the profession?
When I first started teaching, you had to kind of stick to the program. And I was very blessed that I had administrators that I said, I don't want to use my reading book anymore. And said, okay, let me know how that goes. I'm not going to use the English book anymore. Let me know how that goes. And it went really well. But now I wouldn't be allowed to do that. I think there's more regimentation in education now, and I don't think that's necessarily a good thing. Then there's just simple things like clothing. You know, when I first started teaching, women were not allowed to wear slacks. We had to wear dresses or skirts, and then eventually we were allowed to wear pants as long as it had a matching suit jacket.
How have advances in technology impacted teaching during your career and in your view?
I was an early adapter, which meant I got technology, one of the first teachers to get it, and then it was my responsibility to help other teachers. And so, I also was lucky enough that a computer lab was across from my classroom. So I used that lab all the time for writing, for math, for enrichment. And one of my best buddies, she was a second grade teacher, and she would send her second graders down, and my kids would go over and help her. And sometimes that drove the computer teacher a little bit crazy because, you know, he went to teach the kids how to do something on the computer, and those kids already knew how to do it. I love technology. The worst thing I think about technology is how much more paper we use. When we got computers, we're supposed to save paper, and we just use, run extra drafts. Let me get this draft. Let me do this draft. Let me change this. When I was an instructional support teacher, I was able to type notes during my meetings, and that saved me time. And I would just have to go back and fix them up. So definitely technology is a time saver. My husband used to tell me he was going to bury me with my iPad attached to my fingers, whereas he used to say he was going to bury me with a Ditto ink attached to my fingers. Ditto ink was this way we cover things, and you'd get this purple. You'd come home from school every day with purple ink all over your hands. Now you don't have to do that.
How did you handle challenging or disruptive students in a way that turned their behavior around?
I didn't paddle them. But when I first started teaching, that was an option. You could get the principal to whoop the kids on the bottom, and occasionally principals would do that. Sometimes I tried to have the child de-escalate before they got too bad. I'm sure some of you have read the book, Alexander's Terrible, Horrible, No Good, Very Bad Day. And I think I'm going to move to Australia. I had a section in my classroom called Australia. And kids could refer themselves to Australia. Like, I just can't think, or this kid's annoying me. They didn't have to tell me why. They could just go back and sit in Australia. Now, sometimes I would say, Nick, I think you need to go to Australia. But that often was a way of preventing something from happening. Sometimes I would just get very quiet and just shut down. I was known to slam a door to get somebody's attention. But sometimes just sitting down and shutting down and saying, I'm waiting.
In your opinion, what are the most important qualities of a great educator?
Knowing a good bit of child psychology. You really need to understand kids. You need to understand what's going on. And you need to understand parents. One of the things that I used to do is I used to have a phone hour that parents could call my house between 8 and 9 o'clock at night. And a lot of teachers thought I was crazy for doing that. But I felt it was very hard for parents who were having, if the kid was having problems at school, they were sitting at a desk at work with a bunch of other people having to have them listen in on their conversation about their child. And also, I didn't always like using my prep period to talk to parents or trying to get a hold of parents. It was just easier to say, you don't understand the kid's homework? They could call, if it was just a homework question, the kid could call me sooner. Surprisingly, people don't take advantage of that. People thought I was crazy, but kids really didn't take advantage of that. You know, one child that often called me was the parents didn't speak English very well, and so they couldn't help him very well with his homework. So yeah, call me and I'll walk you through the assignment. No biggie.
What was the most challenging part of being a teacher?
I was so blessed with really good administrators that trusted me and gave me a lot of academic freedom. I would say the challenging part was sometimes when I had kids that really needed to be evaluated, getting a psychological evaluation done for them. Sometimes I had to fuss and fight.
And then what was the most rewarding part of being a teacher?
Just seeing the kids grow and develop. You know, I used to sometimes track when I first started using the books, I wanted to make sure I wasn't hurting my kids. So I started tracking and that also was technology. I was able to use this. I would make a spreadsheet with their achievement tests at the beginning of the year, and at the end of the year, I would come in the summer and track their progress to make sure that the kids were doing okay. And so that was rewarding, seeing the kids' progress. Seeing parents appreciate you. You know, sometimes parents would come back during open house and say, you know, you told me not to worry about the reading, that it was going to catch up. And you're right, he's blooming. So, and the fact that a lot of people have told me that they wouldn't have been readers if it wouldn't have been for my pushing. I really made my kids read a lot of books. And so they're readers now.
If you could give one piece of advice to parents and the general public about the importance of teachers in education, what would it be?
Trust the teacher. Trust the teacher is doing what they think is best for your child. Listen to what the teacher has to say. And then I would tell the teachers, listen to what the parents have to say. You know, understand that sometimes things happen. I had this homework policy that there was no excuses for homework. You had to have your homework in. But I actually understood when homework didn't come in. Like, I understand that maybe the little brother's tennis shoes fell apart and they had to go to the mall and get new tennis shoes, and the kid didn't get their homework done. I understand that. Just turn it in tomorrow. But yeah, I think it's really important for the parents and teachers to trust and know that everybody is working in the best interest of the child. You always have to put the child first.
How has teaching influenced your life outside of the classroom, and how has it shaped who you are today?
When I retired, I thought, who am I if I'm not a teacher? Because I've been teaching since 9th grade. Even in college, I ran my own dancing school. I mean, you know, I still teach. I will say it, I'm 75 years old, and I teach adults. I teach a 4-year program through a seminary. I've taught Sunday school. I tutor. I just can't stop teaching. It just isn't, it's just in me. And not to teach is just, I don't know who I am if I'm not teaching. There's a wonderful movie, The Prime of Miss Jean Brodie. It's a very old movie. You know, she goes, I am a teacher first, last, and always. And that's, they will have to assassinate me to get rid of me. And they actually do politically assassinate her, so she has to leave. But yeah, that line has always resonated with me. That's who I am. It's just inbred in me that I am a teacher. I will always be a teacher. You know, my adult people send me little notes saying, thank you so much. You did so much for me. And I don't know. I don't know what I'm going to do when I stop. Maybe die. Maybe my last breath will be like, you didn't do your assignment.
What advice would you offer a first-year teacher?
Go to your coworkers. Ask their advice. Don't pretend that you know everything, because you don't. And the other thing I would go to them is say, make sure you join the union. I was a strong member of PSEA. I did a lot for our local union, and I'm a great believer that teachers need to have a union.
What would you like to say to your former students that are watching?
Love you guys, still think of you all the time.